The night began quietly, almost deceptively so. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the windows, each droplet like a soft drumbeat echoing through the hollow silence of the house. In the distance, low rumbles of thunder whispered through the sky, faint at first, like a warning that the world outside was slowly awakening. Ethan sat alone in the living room, the warm glow of a single lamp casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. It should have felt comforting, familiar, but tonight there was an unease he couldn't shake, a prickling at the back of his neck that told him something wasn't right. He ran a hand through his hair and tried to focus on the mundane. The hum of the refrigerator, the steady tick of the old wall clock, the faint hiss of the rain, but then the lights flickered once, twice, and his chest tightened. A static-filled buzz erupted from the television, even though it was off. From behind the fuzzy screen, a voice, barely audible as if carried on the storm itself, then murmured, "You shouldn't be here tonight." Ethan froze. His eyes darted to the dark corners of the room, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing. Just the shadows stretching and shifting like liquid. He told himself it was the storm playing tricks, the flicker of faulty wiring, a trick of his imagination. Then his phone vibrated sharply on the coffee table, a sudden intrusion against the quiet. He grabbed it. His heart skipped. A text from his own number glowed on the screen. "Don't look at the window." The room seemed to tighten around him. The rain's rhythm grew heavier, more insistent, pounding against the glass as if urging him to obey the warning. His pulse raced, yet a stubborn curiosity gnawed at him, part fear, part compulsion. He told himself it was probably a prank, a cruel joke from someone who knew he lived alone. And yet, something deep inside him whispered that tonight would be different. Tonight the storm wasn't just outside. Tonight the storm was coming for him. Curiosity clawed at Ethan. Despite the gnawing fear in his chest, every instinct screamed to stay away from the window, but he couldn't help himself. He crept toward the glass, heart hammering like the rain outside, each step echoing unnaturally loud in the empty house. The storm had grown louder, the wind thrashing against the walls. Rattling the frames hung crookedly as if the house itself were warning him to turn back. Then, a flash of lightning ripped through the sky, so bright it painted the yard in stark, ghostly detail. And there it was, a figure motionless standing at the edge of the lawn, a tall silhouette impossibly still like a shadow carved out of the night. Ethan's breath caught in his throat, frozen in the pulse between light and darkness. The figure didn't move. It didn't blink. It simply waited. Another flash, and the figure seemed closer. Ethan blinked. Had it moved, or was the storm playing tricks with the light? Each thunderclap that followed was deafening, shaking the window pane, and with every flash of lightning the figure appeared to creep closer, step by step, into the yard. Panic twisted in Ethan's stomach, yet he found himself rooted, unable to turn away. Frantically, he grabbed his phone and dialed a neighbor, anyone, but the line was a distorted tangle of static, interwoven with faint, eerie laughter. Thunder rolled in perfect harmony with the sinister giggle, as if the storm itself were mocking him. His hands trembled, phone slipping against his sweaty palms. The voice on the other end a warped, ghostly echo that disappeared every time the storm roared. Then came the final flash. It was blinding, longer than any before, and when his eyes adjusted, the figure was gone. The lawn was empty. Silence returned. But Ethan's relief was short-lived. The rain had softened enough to reveal its mark, muddy footprints leading from the edge of the yard toward the house. Each print looked impossibly fresh, as if the visitor had only just arrived, and not yet left. Ethan swallowed hard. Something had been out there. Something had come close, and it wasn't finished. Ethan stood in the hallway, every muscle tense, staring at the trail of muddy footprints smeared across his wooden floor. They weren't random. They led somewhere, only straight to the basement door. For a moment he couldn't move. The sound of rain had dulled into a distant murmur, muffled by the weight of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. The doorknob gleamed under the faint light streaked with wet earth. He could feel the humidity seeping up from below, a damp, heavy breath that smelled like rot and old soil. He reached for the handle, his fingers trembling, half expecting something cold to grab him back. The hinges let out a long, aching creak as the door opened, revealing a staircase that sank into blackness. The faint bulb above flickered once, twice, and then steadied just enough to show the first few steps, and the beginning of the footprints. Ethan took one cautious step down. The wood groaned beneath him, the air thick with the smell of mildew and something else, metallic like blood washed clean by rainwater. He aimed his phone's flashlight into the darkness, and the beam cut across the concrete floor below. The prints didn't go down the stairs. They came up. For a moment he couldn't process it. The pattern was unmistakable. Soil pressed deeper at the toe than the heel, the direction clear. Someone had emerged from below, from the ground itself. The smell grew worse the farther he descended, a sickly sweet mixture of earth, rust, and something ancient. Something that didn't belong in a home. Near the bottom he saw it, a dark patch of wet soil beneath the stairs, as if the foundation had been broken open. The ground there looked disturbed, freshly turned, as though something had crawled out from beneath the floor. And then, in the narrow beam of light, he saw something carved into the concrete wall beside it. Words scratched in jagged strokes, uneven but deliberate. "Welcome back." The basement light flickered once more, and in that instant of darkness, Ethan thought he saw movement from within that patch of soil. A shiver ran through him so sharp it left his throat dry. He bolted up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind him, chest heaving, hands shaking. But even through the thick wood, he swore he could still hear it, the soft, wet sound of something shifting in the dirt below. That night, sleep was impossible. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, the house shuddering under the relentless downpour. The walls groaned with every gust of wind, the old pipes whining like distant cries. He kept telling himself it was the storm, just the storm. But that lie had already begun to lose its shape. He grabbed a glass of water from his nightstand, trying to steady his hands when he heard it, a faint hiss of static. It was coming from down the hall, from the guest room, the one that was never used, the one that should have been silent. At first it was barely noticeable, like radio interference drifting through the air. But the closer he got, the clearer it became. The baby monitor he kept boxed away years ago was sitting on the shelf, turned on. Its green light pulsed gently, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Ethan's breath hitched. He hadn't touched that monitor since he moved in. He reached for it slowly, but before his fingers met the plastic, a burst of static filled the room, sharp enough to sting his ears. Then a voice, muffled, low, but unmistakably his own. "She's here again." Ethan froze. His voice, his exact tone, his breath, speaking words he didn't remember saying. The static returned, harsher this time, like the storm outside was bleeding into the signal. He turned toward the hallway mirror. For a second he could swear there was movement behind his reflection, the faint outline of someone standing in the doorway behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Then another flash of lightning filled the house with blinding white. The mirror flickered with the light, and this time he saw her. A woman's reflection behind him, her skin pale as paper, her dress soaked and clinging to her body. Her hair hung like wet vines, and her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The thunder crashed, the lights died, and the house went black. Ethan's own reflection lingered for half a heartbeat longer than it should have, as if the glass hadn't caught up to reality. He stumbled backward, gasping, trying to convince himself he'd imagined it. But the baby monitor still hissed softly on the shelf. And under the storm's howling wind, a woman's whisper wove itself through the static, delicate, melodic, and cruelly familiar. "You promised you wouldn't leave me again." By morning, the storm had weakened, but its presence lingered, a cold, heavy mist that clung to the glass and turned the world outside into a shapeless gray. Ethan hadn't slept. Every sound in the house made him flinch. The creak of the floorboards, the drip of rainwater into the sink, they all sounded alive somehow, like the house was breathing with him. He'd finally decided to call the police. When they arrived, 2 officers stepped through the threshold, bringing the scent of wet uniforms and skepticism with them. They listened to his story with polite detachment, footprints, whispers, reflections, and gave each other the kind of glance that said insomnia, stress, imagination. Still, they humored him. One officer checked the locks while the other shone a flashlight along the basement walls. The light caught something odd, a narrow bulge behind the drywall, a section that didn't quite line up. "You been renovating?" one of them asked. Ethan shook his head. "No, the house was like this when I moved in." The officer pressed a hand against the wall. It sounded hollow. He pried at a loose corner, and the drywall cracked open with a dry snap. A small cloud of dust drifted out, followed by the faint smell of old wood and mildew. Behind the broken panel, nailed into the wooden frame, was an aged photograph, the edges curled and brittle. A family stood in front of the house, this house, smiling beneath a bright summer sky. There was a man, a woman, and a little girl holding a stuffed bear. The photo was dated 1964, but what made Ethan's stomach drop wasn't the time period. It was the faces. The man looked exactly like him. Not just similar, identical. Same jawline, same eyes, even the same faint scar above the right brow. The woman beside him wore a floral dress, her hair long and wavy, and Ethan recognized her instantly. She was the figure from the window. The woman in the mirror, the voice in the static. He stumbled back, his knees weak. The officers exchanged a glance, their earlier skepticism faltering into unease. One of them tried to joke it off, muttering something about family resemblance. But Ethan's eyes stayed locked on the photo's caption, written in faded ink at the bottom margin. "The storm will bring us home." A sudden gust of wind rattled the basement windows, shaking the frame so hard the photograph trembled against the nails. One officer cursed under his breath, muttering that the weather was turning again. But Ethan knew better. It wasn't turning again. It was coming back, and this time he had the sinking feeling the storm wasn't chasing him, it was calling him home. That night, the storm returned. It didn't roll in naturally like before. There was no buildup of distant thunder or shifting winds. One second the night was quiet, and the next lightning split the sky like a blade. The house shook as if something vast and angry had found its way back. Ethan grabbed his phone, but it flickered and died, screen turning to static before going black. The lights in the house dimmed, pulsed, then went out completely. Only the faint blue-white flashes of lightning lit the room in disjointed moments. In those flashes he saw movement. Not outside, inside. A shadow passed behind him in the mirror. A whisper, faint but distinct, echoed from the floorboards. "Read." The rest, his breath caught. He turned slowly toward the basement door. The sound came again, clearer this time. A woman's voice, urgent but almost gentle. "Find what's ours." Ethan descended the steps, each creak sounding like a heartbeat in his ears. He shone a flashlight along the exposed section of wall where the photograph had been. Beneath the wooden beam, something else glimmered, the corner of a rusted metal box. He pried it loose. Inside was a small leather-bound journal, edges flaking from age, pages yellowed and water-stained. On the first page, in looping handwriting, were the words, "If you're reading this, then the storm found you too." His hands trembled as he turned the pages. The entries were written by the woman in the photo, Lena. She spoke of her husband, Elias, who had grown distant, obsessed with the weather, claiming he could hear messages in the thunder. She wrote about nights when Elias would stand outside in the rain, staring up, murmuring, "They're almost here." The last few entries were frantic, ink smeared and words nearly illegible. The storm repeats itself. It's not just rain, it's a loop. Every generation it comes back to finish what began. He looks like Elias, exactly like him. Our daughter sees it too. The thunder isn't the sky, it's them knocking. If the storm calls your name, don't answer the window. Ethan dropped the book, his pulse hammering. He looks like Elias, the resemblance in the photo. The phrase "bring us home," was he their descendant? Or something else? A vessel, maybe, for the man who once lived here. The flashlight flickered again, and for a split second he saw his reflection in the basement window. But it wasn't his reflection anymore. The man staring back wore a 1960s suit with cold eyes and a knowing smile. Then lightning flashed, and the face vanished. By midnight, the wind was howling again. But this wasn't a normal storm, and it was louder, angrier, alive. The thunder didn't just echo. It spoke, deep and resonant, like something ancient growling through the clouds. Ethan sat in the living room, the journal open on his lap, every candle he could find burning around him. The words in Lena's handwriting blurred from the flickering light, but one line kept echoing in his mind. "The thunder isn't the sky. It's them knocking." The walls shuddered as if someone was pounding from outside. The rain wasn't just hitting the windows. It was slapping rhythmically. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, knock, knock. "Knock, silence, knock, knock, knock," Ethan whispered under his breath. "It's just wind. It's just the wind." But deep down he knew it wasn't, because the rhythm was too human. Lightning flashed again, bright enough to blind him for a second. In that instant he saw her, Lena, standing at the edge of the yard, drenched, her hair plastered to her face, eyes wide and unblinking. She wasn't just watching this time, she was mouthing something. He pressed his hand to the window. "What do you want?" A thunderclap answered, so violent it threw him backward. The candles blew out. The room went black. Then his phone, dead for hours, suddenly lit up on the floor. A message appeared from his own number again. "Let us in." The power surged and every light in the house turned on at once, flickering violently like a pulse. The TV came alive on static, and in between the white noise he heard voices, overlapping whispers, hundreds of them. He broke the promise. It must repeat. The door was never sealed. Ethan backed toward the basement door, clutching the journal like a shield. Then from the static a single word cut through, spoken in a deep male voice that sounded just like his own. "Elias." The temperature dropped so sharply his breath turned to fog. The walls began to weep, thin trickles of muddy water seeping through the paint. The smell of wet soil filled the air again, stronger than ever. And then he heard footsteps inside the walls, soft, slow, wet, moving upward. He turned toward the stairwell, heart pounding when lightning flashed again, and every photo frame in the hallway fell to the floor at once. In that brief illumination, he saw new shapes forming on the wall, handprints. Muddy, smudged, fresh. He ran to the front door, but when he grabbed the handle, it burned him. Metal hot like it had been struck by lightning. He stumbled back, clutching his hand, when a new sound rose from beneath the floorboards, knocking. From below, he froze. Then with a final, ear-splitting thunderclap, the basement door flung open on its own, darkness yawning wide beneath the stairs. And from that black void, a voice, calm, almost soothing, whispered, "Welcome home." Elias. Ethan stood frozen at the top of the basement stairs. The voice still echoed in his ears, and low, smooth, intimate, "Welcome home, Elias." But who was Elias? Why did that name send chills down his spine, like an echo of something he should have remembered? He gripped the wooden railing and took a slow step downward. The air grew colder, denser. It smelled like rain-soaked dirt and something older. Memory. The thunder above rolled again, but down here it sounded muffled, as if the storm existed behind walls of water. Each step creaked under his weight, and with every step the basement seemed to expand. It wasn't supposed to be this big. He'd been down here before. Yet now the stairs stretched longer than they should. When he reached the bottom, the light from above barely touched the ground. His flashlight flickered, then steadied, revealing the same dirt patch under the stairs. But something was different this time. The soil was breathing. He crouched. The dirt rose and fell slowly like lungs under the earth. He reached out, trembling, and brushed it with his fingers. It was warm. Then a faint whisper, "You left me here." He jerked back, pointing the light toward the sound, and the beam caught something glinting in the corner. A ring. Old gold, half buried in the mud. He picked it up, wiped the dirt off. The inscription read, E+L, 1964. Lightning struck again outside, and the flash illuminated the entire basement for a second, revealing dozens of faces pressed against the dirt walls. Pale, eyeless, half-formed, like clay molds waiting to wake. The ground trembled. The journal in Ethan's pocket began to shake violently, pages flipping open on their own until it stopped on the last entry. October 12th, when thunder calls. I must return to her. The same date. Tonight, his phone buzzed. No signal. Just a notification from the Notes app. One he didn't remember writing. It read, "If you're reading this, Ethan, we never left. You just forgot which side of the storm you were on." He dropped the phone. The breathing soil cracked open slightly, releasing a soft glow, like light trapped beneath the ground. From the fissure, he heard the faint sound of a woman humming, that same haunting lullaby from the night before. The walls around him began to ripple like water. The wooden beams stretched and warped, shifting into the shape of furniture, a table, a chair, a lamp. Within seconds, the basement was gone. He was standing in a living room, but not his own. The wallpaper was yellowed, the furniture from the 1960s. Rain tapped the old glass windows. And there, By the fireplace stood Lena, not ghostly this time, but alive, radiant, smiling. She turned to him and said softly, "You came back, just like you promised." Thunder shook the house again, but this time it didn't sound outside and it sounded within. Ethan felt something pulling him backward, like gravity reversing. The journal fell from his hand. He looked down. His reflection in the window no longer looked like Ethan. It looked like Elias. And just before the lightning struck again, Lena whispered in his ear, "Now it's your turn to remember how we died." The air vibrated with an electric hum, the kind that comes just before a lightning strike, but it wasn't outside anymore. It was inside the walls. Inside him, Elias, stumbled backward as the world around him began to glitch. The living room flickered between decades, modern one second, sepia-toned and dust-choked the next. The TV on the wall became a boxy black and white model, its screen hissing static that slowly shaped into words. "Stay this time." He blinked, disoriented. The house creaked as if sighing, every thunderclap syncing with his heartbeat. The floorboards swelled beneath his feet, damp, pulsing, like they remembered drowning. A flash of lightning poured through the window, and for a fraction of a second, Ethan saw two versions of himself reflected in the glass. One terrified, one smiling faintly like a man finally remembering a secret. Lena appeared again, her wet hair clinging to her neck, her eyes both loving and hollow. She approached slowly, the storm bending around her like she was its center. "You always run when it rains," she whispered. "But you promised me forever. You promised to come back." "I'm not him," Ethan rasped. "I'm not." She placed a trembling hand on his cheek. Her touch was warm, human. But when he looked down, her wrist was dripping water, her skin translucent. "You are," she said. "You just forgot which year you woke up in." The thunder outside roared like a scream. The wallpaper peeled back to reveal the photograph, the one from 1964, nailed to the wall behind the paint. Except now it wasn't just a picture. It moved, rain fell within it. Lightning flashed across the faces, and standing there was him, arm around Lena, smiling at a camera that no longer existed. The lights flickered. The TV turned itself on again, showing the same storm, the same house, from outside. Through the screen, Ethan saw a figure standing in the rain. It was him, watching. He staggered toward the window, gasping, and for the first time truly saw. The figure outside wasn't coming closer. He was standing still because he was already inside. The thunder built to a crescendo, a single deafening crack that seemed to split the sky open. A blinding white light filled the room, swallowing everything in sight. For a heartbeat there was silence, then the faint sound of rain. The modern furniture returned. The lights were steady again. The air smelled fresh, like a storm had just passed. Ethan stood in the middle of his living room, panting, drenched in sweat. Had it all been a hallucination? A dream brought on by exhaustion? He reached for his phone to call someone, anyone, but froze. The lock screen photo had changed. It was the same picture from the wall, Ethan and Lena, smiling, dated October 12, 1964, and beneath it, a new notification blinked. "Welcome home, Elias." Outside, thunder rolled again, not fading but circling back. The same exact pattern as before, same intervals, same rhythm. The storm hadn't ended. It had reset. Morning came. The storm had finally passed, or so it seemed. The sky above the small town was washed in soft gray light, gentle, harmless. The kind of quiet that comes after destruction, when the world pretends it's safe again. A delivery van rolled slowly down the street, splashing through puddles. The driver glanced toward Ethan's house, its paint chipped, its windows streaked with rain. Everything looked perfectly normal, except for one detail. The front door was wide open. Police arrived a few hours later after neighbors reported a man shouting during the storm, then silence. They found the living room undisturbed, the kitchen light still flickering and a faint smell of burnt ozone in the air. No sign of struggle. No Ethan. Only one thing drew their attention. On the far wall, behind a torn strip of wallpaper, they found the photograph again. The same picture of a smiling family in front of the house. But it was different now. The man's face wasn't from 1964 anymore. It was Ethan's. His modern haircut, his familiar stare, his uneasy half-smile frozen forever beside the woman who never aged. and scrawled beneath the photo in fresh ink were the words "together again." Until the next storm. One of the officers laughed nervously, calling it a prank. Another took a picture on his phone, but the image came out distorted, the faces twisted, eyes blacked out. They left quickly after that, saying they'd file a missing person report later. By dusk, the house was silent again. Only the wind whispered through the cracks, carrying faint laughter. Days passed. The story made local headlines: man missing after severe thunderstorm. But the town soon forgot, like it always did. People moved on. The listing went back online. A month later, a young couple drove up the same gravel road. They stepped out of their car, holding hands, marveling at the house. "It's perfect," the woman said. "A little creepy maybe, but perfect." The man chuckled. "Old houses have stories. I like that." As they toured the place, they commented on the old woodwork, the faint smell of rain that still lingered in the air. They didn't notice the small ring glinting beneath the basement stairs, or the thin line of dirt that traced up toward the living room. When they reached the wall where the photo once hung, the husband frowned. "What's this?" There was a faint outline, a rectangle lighter than the rest of the wall. The realtor smiled awkwardly. "Oh, that? The last owner was kind of a collector. He left something behind during the storm." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. The woman looked up, uneasy. "Storm coming?" The realtor nodded. "Forecast says it'll hit tonight." They all laughed it off, and just weather. Just coincidence. But as the first droplets began to fall, the electricity flickered once. The baby monitor, left behind in the guest room, lit up. Static whispered through it. Then a voice, faint but unmistakable, spoke through the crackle of the storm. "Don't look at the window." Lightning flashed. For a split second, in the reflection of the glass, the couple thought they saw a man and woman standing outside in the rain, smiling. And just like that, the storm began again.